The life of a geisha. What should we know about geishas? Europeans' misconceptions about geishas which are difficult to understand. Who of us has not heard of geishas? Some consider them to be women of loose morals or educated courtesans. Meanwhile, in fact, geishas do not provide sexual services, and in Japan they are considered popularizers of traditional Japanese culture. So, let's experience one day of a real Japanese geisha and find out, is it true that they are not really geishas at all? And why men are geishas too? Is it true that these beauties were proud of bald heads, colored their teeth black, and didn't paint their faces white? And what do geishas and escorts have in common? So, meet Mineko Wasaki, one of the most famous geishas. It was she who became a prototype of the main character of the famous book and film Memoirs of a Geisha. After the book publication, in which the author misrepresented many things, she was offended by the reputation of geisha, sued him, and won the case. Then she wrote her own book, The True Memoirs of Geisha, in which she told about everyday things that are difficult to understand for Europeans. She was the 11th child in a family of ruined aristocrats. At the age of 5, her parents sent her to a geisha house where her sisters had been living already. She settled in Kyoto in a special place called Okiya, where geishas were trained. It should be noted that there was nothing reprehensible in such behavior of parents in Japan. It was prestigious, and you couldn't worry about the future of your daughter. In addition, our protagonist at the age of 3 realized that this profession was her mission. Geishas are not prostitutes. They are called yujo. Such fame was fixed in the minds of Europeans at the end of the Second World War, when prostitutes flocked to the American military and called themselves geisha girls to attract attention. And in fact, geisha is not geisha at all, but geisha. In Japanese, this word is composed of 2 characters, gei and sa. It can be translated as person of art. That is, geishas were not escorts, but people of art, artisans. The history of this mysterious beauty goes back to the 17th century. Now you will be surprised. The first geishas in the world were men, and only men. And only after several centuries, women could squeeze into this environment. Initially, they were artists of the traditional Japanese kabuki theater, who dressed up as buffoons and cheered up the clients of prostitutes, yujo, at the parties. However, Japanese men were bored with actors and ladies of the night. Then a woman tried to play a role of a geisha for the first time in the 18th century. She was a former courtesan, Kasen-san, from the Arcade House in Tokyo's Yoshiwara red light district. From the very beginning, they were divided into 2 categories: Shiro geisha, white geisha, and Kurabe geisha, tipping geisha. The Shiro geishas only entertained the client. The others were selling their bodies. But in 1779, it was prohibited for good. By the way, the easiest way to distinguish call girls from a true geisha is to look at the belt of her kimono. If it is tied in a complicated way from behind, it is a flower woman, as geishas are called. And ladies of the night tied their belts in front. In the 19th century, the geisha's motto was, "We sell art, not bodies." The geisha herself was a living art. They were studying music, dance, and calligraphy for years, and grueling classes were lasting their entire lives. No matter how old a geisha was, she had to play music every day. They were famous for writing melancholic songs and creating slow, graceful dances with complex symbolism. It took years to acquire these skills. A girl who entered the school became shikomi, or servants, at first. Then they became students, called Mineko in Kyoto, that means dancing child, and Hangyoku in Tokyo, that means half jewel. Mineko could be easily recognized by her age and clothing. They wore kimonos with long girlish sleeves, about a meter long. Mineko wore sandals at the height of 15 centimeters with ringing bells, which were called okobo. Therefore, a girl taller than 160 centimeters couldn't become a Mineko, because a tall Mineko would look ridiculous because of high shoes and hairstyles. The day of the apprentices began around 8 in the morning, and the geishas at 10. Then geishas and apprentices went to dance, music, hikebana, and other arts classes. To understand how serious the classes were, keep in mind that they would end only at 6 p.m. Geisha training was so hard that it is illegal today. Well, let's go back to our protagonist. Mineko began to study diligently. According to tradition, after 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days after her birth, Mineko began to study traditional dances, komai, which became her real passion. She also had a great success in playing the samisen, a lute-like Japanese instrument, and calligraphy. She mastered all the details of geisha's behavior and body care. Mineko's talent for dancing was immediately noticed by the owner of the school. She decided to adopt our protagonist and made Mineko her heiress. She had got an experienced geisha as a mentor. It was her sister. Mineko's talent made her famous, but at first she suffered from the envy and intrigues of other students. She writes, "After I became a Mineko, I went to the hairdresser 1 time in 5 days. To preserve my hairstyle, I slept on a lacquered rectangular wooden pillow with a thin pillowcase. At first I couldn't sleep at all, but I soon got used to it. In Oka, there was a technique to prevent the pillow from moving during the night. The maids scattered rice around the pillow, and if the girl moved, the rice got stuck in her hair, and in the morning she had to go to the hairdresser again. After styling, I went to the barber to shave my face. It was a custom of Japanese women. When I was 1 year old, my father cut my hair for the first time and shaved my face. Since then, I've been doing it once a month." What else do we associate geishas with? With very exotic ideas about beauty. Tell me, how would you distinguish a geisha from other Japanese ladies? Of course, the first thing that crosses mind is a face covered with white paint. This makeup is called osiroi. But in fact, such familiar white faces have only young Mineko students and youngest geishas in the first years of work. Modern osiroi is harmless to the skin, but until the 20th century, geishas often got lead poisoning because the bases of makeup contained lead. The geishas themselves covered their faces with white paint only for special occasions, and their everyday makeup was tender and looked like a makeup of ordinary women. By the time when a geisha was considered one of the best, she got rid of all the white paint on her face. Mature geishas did not wear special hairstyles with a variety of combs and pins. They made a simple twist. But there is another sure way to recognize a geisha. This is a bald spot on the top of their heads, which they receive as students. In Mineko's hairstyle, a small strand of hair was pulled back so tightly that after years it simply fell out, and the hair didn't grow on that spot anymore. Of course, at work the bald spot was covered with a wig or comb. Geishas were proud of their bald heads and called them the Mineko's medal. After all, it proved that they had been studying for many years. Another feature of a beautiful geisha were black teeth, called ohaguro. In addition to the questionable beauty, the ohaguro teeth also smelled unpleasant because of the specific dye. However, there was an advantage. The covering prevented tooth damage and strengthened the tooth enamel. Another beauty hack. Geisha's eyebrows were completely plucked out, and instead of them they drew new ones with a pencil above their natural location. The shape of the eyebrows was so important that if it was imperfect, that is like a crescent, the makeup had to be removed and started again. Well, guess what was considered the most important element of female beauty? Extremely small feet. Well, what about clothing? Do you want to understand how geisha felt? Ask somebody to tie your chest with a towel. After all, a kimono is very tight. And with another towel, tie your legs at the knee level, like a tight kimono hem. Put on your beach flip-flops. Now imagine that at the same time you still have to get down on your knees every now and then, holding a tray in your hands. The ideal figure, in the Japanese sense, looked like this. A long neck, clearly visible in the open collar of the kimono. Almost complete absence of chest and waist, short and crooked legs turned inwards as if knees are fastened, and a specific gait. Mameha from Memoirs of a Geisha taught an apprentice, Sayuri, move at the same pace, taking small steps to make the hem of the kimono flutter. A walking woman should give an impression of a wave breaking on a sandy beach. Another fact that changes our understanding of geishas is that an old geisha is highly sought. The heyday of geisha fell on the age of 50 or 60. It was believed that at this age a geisha is more beautiful, smarter, and more experienced. By the age of 30, geishas were allowed not to whiten their faces. A geisha retired if she got married, but if she wanted to remain a geisha, she continued to be one for as long as she wanted. The world's oldest still working geisha, Yuko Asakusa, is 94 years old, and she has been working as a geisha since she was 13. She is usually hired by politicians and incredibly rich businessmen who are ready to pay more. After starting around 6 in the evening, young geishas and apprentices put on makeup, changed into a working kimono, and then go to banquets. Neither geisha nor apprentices eat at the parties. They have a solid dinner before work. After all, the working day of geisha ends well after midnight, at 1 o'clock in the morning or even later. In fact, at the banquet, Ozasiki, geishas are party entertainers. Ozasiki is a traditional Japanese-style lunch and entertainment. Traditional dances, musical instruments, customers and geishas drink a lot of beer or sake and play, just not be surprised, they play a well-known game, rock, paper, scissors, but the loser must drink a shot of sake. Mineko Iwasaki has been the best-paid geisha ever. However, earning money was not important to her. As her okia, Iwasaki could afford any expenses. She became the face of this school at the age of 15, being a student. After becoming a geisha, she tried to visit as many tea houses as possible during the night. She entertained many famous people at the banquets. US President Gerald Ford, fashion designer Gucci, Prince Charles, and Queen Elizabeth. She earned about $500,000 a year. However, it caused her a lot of hardships. Only 3 hours of sleep a day, many years of work without days off, and constant exhausting lesson for several hours every day. In addition, she was desperately envied and suffered from the intrigues of her colleagues. They stuck needles in the hem of her kimono, attacked her on the street, rejected phones, ambushed her and threatened. After changing from apprentice to geisha, Mineko decided to try living on her own outside of Okia. She rented a luxurious apartment, but soon realized that she didn't have any skills to live independently. She didn't even know how to turn on the gas stove. A year later, she moved back. At the age of 18, a geisha could find a dana, a patron who pays for all current expenses, including expensive kimonos. He might be just a patron of the arts. Actually, he often turned to be a geisha's lover. He was obliged to promote her. It was not necessary to have a dana, but without that, it was harder for geisha to leave her okia and become a full-blown star in her profession. Our protagonist fell in love at the age of 21. Her choice was the actor Shintaro Katsu, who was almost twice her age. He desired her attention, but he was married. I was madly in love with him, Mineko said. Shintaro lied to Mineko, promised to marry her, but continued to be with his wife, so they broke up. Our protagonist was forced to end her career as the most famous geisha at the peak of fame. Too early, at the age of 29, because her health was under threat. After all, her working day began at 7:30 and ended well after midnight. The rest of the time was spent on self-care, event preparations, training. There were only 3 hours left to sleep. Mineko has got serious problems with kidneys and inflammations. She realized that she had to save herself. Mineko was officially adopted by the owner of the geisha house and became her heiress, but she didn't keep this business. Instead of okia, she built a restaurant and a club. After her retirement, she met the artist Zintiro Sato, got married, and gave birth to a daughter. They are happily married. The husband even took the name of his famous wife. If Zintiro is asked about marrying Mineko, all he says is, "I'm very lucky." Do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Oh, and click on the bell so you get notified when the new episode comes out.